Did you know that there are two modern day renaissances of the Bible that are going on right now? This person here, Crown, is an example of one of those renaissances that's going on, but it is not the true renaissance. It is the one that will lead to the exact same fate to which people are in today. And that 1,000 years from now or less, that people will be then making a renaissance from the type of Christianity that this person himself is trying to create. So what is a renaissance? And I'll explain that plus the two that are going on now and why this story is just jacked up or his thought process doesn't work. So the Christianity that many Christians claim that Jesus would have created, or the teachings of Jesus, are not being followed by the church. It's one of the things that created the first renaissance of the Catholic Church. So the Christians from the first century, is what they talk about, believed a different way of life than what the church became after the 5th century BCE. 5th century CE. You see, although the Roman government fell, the Roman church still maintained its power, and if anything, it grew in power. And then from that time frame of 381 BCE, when the Roman church came into power, up until the 1300s, the Roman church became very corrupt and had doctrines that went against the ethos of many of the people, to the point where it was more oppressive than the Roman government, military-wise, was in itself. So, out of that oppression, in the 1300s, we have the Renaissance. That Renaissance happened because the people of Europe rediscovered the Corpus Hermeticum, which is a Greek rendition of ancient Egyptian wisdom of enlightenment. Supposedly coming from the Book of Thoth, but most likely coming from a collection of books, whether it be the Book of the Dead or the Book of the Living, and any other hermetic alchemical thoughts that the Egyptians personified during their reigns before they were conquered by the Greeks. The Greeks attempted to make their own, to make a copy of this thought process with a Greek flair to it, which is why they call it Hellenization, which created the Corpus Hermeticum. Out of these teachings, the Renaissance began. A time frame of enlightenment, a deeper understanding of science and energy and the flow and natural order of the universe. But the problem is that they tried to combine this with teachings of the church. And so 200 years later, you have people who separate and call themselves Calvinists by John Calvin. People who separate call themselves Lutheran because of Martin Luther and the entire Protestant movement. Although they were looking to reform the church, they created a separate division of the church, still trying to hold on to those core teachings of the church and make it make sense. And now here we are, roughly about 700 years later, and we have people who have recognized that the church has remained to be corrupt and teaching doctrines that don't make sense, like Jonah in the belly of a fish. How can a man be in the belly of a fish with no air, no oxygen, no water, no food, and yet still survive for 3 days? Understanding the ridiculousness of that, we have people like Crown who try to make it make sense and make the mathing by saying that when you see 3 days of darkness, go home and repent. Because that's what it was saying. Jonah was in 3 days of darkness, that he was in a state of meditation for 3 days. And when the 3 days of darkness happened, but the problem is you made it literal, that when you see 3 days of darkness, go home and repent. 3 days of darkness can only happen one of three ways. One, the sun explodes. And if the sun explodes, you do not have 3 days of darkness. You have eternity of darkness and earth that no longer exists. And it wouldn't take 3 days for the explosion of the sun to destroy the earth. So there is no 3 days. Jonah could not have meant that. If the other way of the darkness would be if the sun implodes and becomes a black hole. If the sun becomes a black hole, it'll pull the earth out of its habitable zone in less than 3 days. The earth will have violent eruptions all over it. You don't have 3 days. You have far less than 3 days before the total earth is devoid of life and before it is sucked into the black hole. The only other way would be for the moon to stop directly in front of the sun and stay stationary in front of the sun. But in order to have complete darkness around the entire planet as it rotates, the moon would have to be a lot closer to the earth, yet we know that the moon is actually moving further away from the earth. So the moon would have to change its directions from moving away from the earth towards the earth, which means the earth's gravitational pull would have to become stronger on the moon in order for that to happen. And then the moon get close enough where it can truly blot out the sun and blot out all light, and then stay stationary in a synchronous orbit to be able to do that. That is even more impossible. The sun can explode or implode is more plausible than what you are suggesting would cause 3 days of darkness, because that is the only way you would get 3 days of darkness. So it is these ideas of trying to say that the Bible is more metaphoric, is more an allegories, that everything is an allegory, everything is a metaphor. Those are the methodologies of this new renaissance that is happening within the church, of people saying, I'm not Christian, I'm spiritual. I don't believe in the teachings of the church, I believe in the teachings of Jesus. That is a false flag renaissance, because you end up in the same position that the church is in today, where you're just really creating a more diluted version of your so-called church anyway. Now, the true renaissance are those who are understanding the Corpus Hermeticum, who are understanding ancient Kemetic wisdom and other ancient wisdom around the world, understanding the wisdom of the Tao, that the entire universe is energy and frequencies. And when you can harmonize with that energy and frequency, then you develop into a greater sense of a being connected to the universe, that you become one of the enlightened. As the Tao teaches, once you get into don't fight the flow of the river, but get into the flow of the river, and you will come out on the other side. You may not come out in the other side directly across from where you stepped in, but you will make it through the other side without drowning, because you got into the natural flow of the universe, the natural flow of the river. Christians and others try to fight the flow and end up drowning in their own fight, not realizing that all they need to do was go and understand and get in harmony with the natural flow of the universe. You see, the true renaissance is those who are looking inward for their, what you would call salvation. Although we recognize that there is absolutely zero need for salvation. But those who are looking inward instead of looking outward. Even the Gnostics looked outward to a certain degree at Yaldabaoth and the Sophia and the Plamora, instead of just simply looking inward. There are no outside forces. As the African proverb says, if there is no devil within, then no devil without can harm me. Recognizing that the only powers and principalities that you deal with are the ones inside yourself, and sometimes the ones inside of another human being whose causation is trying to have an effect on you. So that would be like your boss causation has an effect on your income. That type of cause and effect, but in all different areas of your life. But at the end of the day, you are the prime causal force in your life. And when you recognize the power of cause and effect, and what pole you're vibrating on and where you're vibrating on the pole, and you can create the high vibrational swing to move yourself to a higher vibrational state of energy and frequency, you then become one with the universe in its knowledge and understanding, and gain not power over it, but harmonizing partnership with it. This is the true renaissance. There is no need for worship of some deity, if that deity exists, because if it's knowable and understandable and you can have a relationship with it and it needs worship, it is not the way. It is not the all. The all is in all, but all are not the all. Understand that, and you will begin to understand the key of power. So always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is not